The truth that horrified everyone. A childhood filled with nightmares. Stories related to child abuse cannot leave anyone indifferent. Today, I will tell you two shocking stories about abuse of one's own child and families whose outward respectability was never in doubt. Let's go. The fate of Sylvia Likens became one of the most shocking and terrifying events in the history of American criminology. Her tragedy is horrifying not only because of the monstrous individuals who were around the girl, but also because of the complete indifference of those who could have intervened and prevented this tragedy. Sylvia Marie Likens was born on January 3, 1949, in the small town of Lebanon, Indiana, USA. Her parents, Elizabeth and Lester Likens, were performers who toured the country with circus shows. The family had 5 children, among whom the youngest sister, Jenny, suffered from serious musculoskeletal problems and could not move without assistance. Sylvia was known for her responsiveness and kindness, often taking care of her siblings, especially Jenny, for whom she became a true support. When her parents went on tour, the girl took on the responsibility for the children, helped them with their studies, cooked meals, and cared for her sister as if she were her own daughter. Even when Lester and Elizabeth were at home, there was tension in their family. Frequent arguments, shouting, and dish-breaking became an everyday reality. The money they earned was not enough even for basic needs. The parents often left the children in the care of distant relatives. In their short lives, they managed to move about 14 times. In each new place, the conditions left much to be desired. Hunger, old worn-out clothes, lack of care and love from adults. All of this was normal for the children. In 1965, Lester and Elizabeth went through another crisis in their relationship. The father, deciding to move to another state in search of work, left his wife and children in Lebanon. Upon returning, he was shocked to find that the children were now under the care of a woman named Gertrude Banasuski, while Elizabeth was in jail on theft charges. Unable to manage both raising the children and looking for work, Lester offered Gertrude to become a nanny for a symbolic fee of $20 a week. This stranger was supposed to take care of Sylvia and Jenny, who had limited physical abilities. Lester took the other children with him. The Banasuski family lived in extremely difficult conditions. The house lacked basic amenities such as a toilet or shower, and instead of a proper kitchen, they made do with sandwiches from old bread and food gathered from garbage dumps. Nevertheless, Lester saw no problem with such conditions, and, leaving his daughters with Gertrude, he asked her to be strict with the girls, as he believed Elizabeth spoiled them too much. After Lester's departure, Sylvia and Jenny began to adjust to their new reality. Initially, their life in the Banasuski house was relatively calm. Despite the deprivation and constant hunger, the girls continued to hope for a better future and tried to build relationships with the children. Gertrude's children, of whom there were 7. A week later, an unpleasant incident occurred related to the payment for Gertrude's services. The check that Lester sent was delayed, and this provoked an unexpectedly aggressive reaction from the woman. She accused Sylvia and Jenny of theft and inappropriate behavior, threatening them with physical punishment. Even after the money was deposited into the account, Gertrude's mood did not improve. She held a grudge against the girls, believing that she was forced to work for a whole week for free. Now Gertrude regularly subjected Sylvia and Jenny to beatings for the slightest misdeeds. One day, her daughter Paula complained that the girls ate too much food at a church dinner, and in response, Gertrude beat them on the back with a wooden paddle, delivering about 30 blows. This incident became the starting point for a further series of abuses that Sylvia was subjected to. Now all the aggression associated with endless depression and other psychological issues was directed solely at her. Sylvia's youth and cheerful disposition irritated Gertrude Banasuski, so she attacked Sylvia at every opportunity. After another outburst of the woman's anger, Sylvia tried to divert her attention to Paula, Gertrude's daughter, by revealing a secret that Paula had confided in her. Paula was pregnant but was afraid to tell her mother. Unfortunately, Sylvia's attempt to redirect Gertrude's anger towards her own daughter was unsuccessful. In a rage, the woman accused Sylvia herself of promiscuity, who, at her age, knew almost nothing about where babies come from and couldn't provide a convincing response to the accusation. Paula, outraged by Likens' betrayal, brutally beat her, accusing her of revealing her secret. Gertrude began to incite her children and their friends to torment Sylvia. She regularly accused the girl of spreading false rumors about her daughters and their acquaintances. In doing so, she encouraged the mistreatment of lichens. For instance, because Sylvia allegedly called her friend Anna Sisko's mother a fallen woman, Anna split her lip and pulled out a chunk of her hair. And Stephanie Banaszewski's friend Coy Hubbard practiced judo moves on her. The violence against Sylvia was becoming increasingly brutal. Returning from school, where she was treated with contempt and considered the source of all gossip, lichens faced Gertrude, who forced her to starve, subjected her to humiliation, locked her in a room for days, and mercilessly beat her.
Many of the Banaszewskis' neighbors knew about what was happening, but preferred not to get involved. For example, Judy Duke told her mother about Sylvia's beatings, to which she responded that it was a way to punish misbehaving children. Phyllis Vermillion, who was planning to hire Gertrude as a babysitter, also knew about the abuse of Sylvia. She saw the beaten girl in the Banaszewski house and changed her mind. Phyllis met with Sylvia twice, and both times on the floor. Gertrude's eldest daughter proudly claimed that she had beaten. Lichens, Sylvia's older sister, Diana, also knew about the violence in the Banaszewski house. She came to town to visit her and Jenny, but decided that the bruises on Sylvia's body were from careless play in the street. Despite all the hardships and cruelty Sylvia faced, her spirit remained unbroken. The 16-year-old girl continued to attend church, tried to find time to be alone, and listen to her favorite Beatles songs and other small joys. But most importantly, she made no attempt to escape. The reason was that Sylvia understood her younger disabled sister, Jenny, would not be able to escape, and she couldn't leave her in the hands of their tormentors. Unfortunately, the realization that Sylvia would not abandon Jenny only strengthened the power. Benyashevsky. Soon, Gertrude, along with her children, began to intimidate the younger lichens, threatening her with violence if she did not participate in the beatings of her sister. Jenny's mental state was so suppressed that she couldn't resist the pressure, and soon she joined in the bullying and physical abuse of her sister. A few weeks later, Gertrude forbade Sylvia from attending school, and her cruelty towards the girl intensified. She beat her several times a day. She extinguished cigarettes on her skin and denied her access to the bathroom, which led to a serious kidney illness for the girl. Nothing could stop Gertrude Banaszewski from being cruel to poor Sylvia anymore. She threw the girl into the basement. There, in complete darkness, eating her own excrement, Sylvia spent the last few months of her short life. Gertrude and her children regularly came to the basement to torture her. In one of those moments, their cruelty reached its peak when they burned several insulting inscriptions on the victim's body and then raped her. But even that wasn't enough. Gertrude decided to make money off the abuse of the girl. For a modest fee of 5 cents, she allowed the neighborhood children to do whatever they pleased with Sylvia, and they indulged in perversions as much as they could for their money. I'm even afraid to list what sick fantasies she became the embodiment of. The girl. The beatings were just the tip of the iceberg compared to what other children did to her for their pocket money. I'm sure they told their parents about it. And I'm just amazed why no one expressed the slightest sympathy, let alone a desire to stop the deranged woman and her offspring. After some time, following such ordeals, Sylvia's body couldn't take it anymore. The girl began to lose her memory and spent most of her time in a delirious state, which further angered Gertrude and her accomplices. Sylvia Lichens passed away on October 26, 1965, from a brain hemorrhage. A few days before that, she lost the ability to speak and move due to the shock caused by the torture and beatings. Gertrude Banaszewski herself reported the incident to the police. The police who arrived at the scene discovered Sylvia Lichens' body. Initially, Gertrude claimed that the girl was a prostitute and had sustained injuries elsewhere, coming to her for help. But later she confessed to the deed. Jenny, who was also interrogated, initially tried to protect Gertrude. But before the police left the crime scene, she quietly whispered, "Save me, and I'll tell everything." Shortly after that, all those involved in the abuse of Sylvia were detained. Gertrude, her children, and 2 neighborhood boys were arrested on the same day the body was found. The remaining perpetrators, including classmates, neighbors, and other people, were arrested 3 days later. Many participants in this horror were only recognized as witnesses and were soon released after spending several months in detention. Among them was Gertrude's daughter Stephanie, who agreed to testify against her mother and her accomplices. Anna Sisko, Judy Duke, and Michael Monroe were also released. They participated in the brutal beatings and harassment. However, Gertrude, her children Jenny and Paula, as well as Richard Hobbs and Coy Hubbard, who directly subjected Sylvia to torture, were charged with first-degree murder on December 30th, 1965. Despite the defense from lawyers who tried to prove their innocence, on May 19, 1966, all five were found guilty of committing this horrific crime. Gertrude Banaszewski was sentenced to death, but the sentence was later commuted to life imprisonment. Her daughter Paula also received a life sentence in the Indiana State Prison. Jenny, Richard, and Coy were found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to terms ranging from 2 to 20 years. Interestingly, Gertrude herself denied her guilt during the trial, citing mental disorders and the influence of asthma medication. During the sentencing, she broke down in tears and repeatedly mentioned Sylvia Likens' name. Paula, who gave birth to a child in prison, named the girl Gertrude after her mother, stating that she saw her as a role model. This case shocked all of America, causing a wave of shock and anger. The brutal torture that the poor girl endured sparked public outrage. But another aspect of the investigation attracted no less attention when it was revealed that many witnesses knew what was happening in Gertrude's house. Some neighbors, the Baptist church pastor Roy Julian, Sylvia's school nurse, adult neighbors, and other people gave testimonies confirming that they were aware of the situation. However, convinced by Gertrude of the necessity of punishment, no one came to the girl's aid. Over time, the high-profile case of Sylvia Likens began to be forgotten, but in 1970, the Indiana Supreme Court decided to review the sentences of Gertrude and Paul. The judges explained that the women were not able to fully exercise their right to defense due to widespread interest and pressure from society. Paula was released 2 years after the start of the new trial, and Gertrude was released from prison in 1980, which sparked a new wave of protests. In response, human rights activists from around the world came to Indiana, demanding to uphold the original court decision. Sylvia's family, including her sister Jenny Likens, stood in defense of the original sentence, protesting the release of the murderer on local television. Despite the protests, Gertrude managed to get out of prison, change her name, and start a new life in another state. She died a few years later from lung cancer. Paula, who also changed her name, moved to Iowa, where she lives with her husband and children. In 2012, she was removed from the school where she worked as a psychologist's assistant. The reason was information about her past that reached the administration. Other participants in the tragedy also did not get lost in life, and some even publicly repented. Jenny Banaszewski, for example, repeatedly expressed regret about her role in Sylvia's death and admitted her guilt. Subsequently, she began working with teenagers experiencing their parents' divorce, claiming that it was anger at her parents and their divorce that pushed her to the crime. Although more than 50 years have passed since Sylvia tragically died, her story remains in people's memory. She inspired the creation of several works, including a book by Jack Ketchum, The Girl Next Door, and the film, An American Crime, directed by Tommy O'Haver. People continue to visit the memorial. On her grave, it reads, "This monument is dedicated to the memory of an innocent child who tragically died. This is a promise from the Indianapolis Police to all children. We will make this city safe." This is an equally shocking story about a girl named Jeannie Irene, which, although it did not end as tragically as the previous one, is also full of horrific details. In the fall of 1970, a woman contacted the social services with a question about how to apply for disability. With her was a girl who looked much younger than her age. She was severely hunched over, emaciated, and constantly wiping drool that was running down her chin. The social workers immediately called the police. That same day, the girl was sent to the hospital, and her parents were detained for questioning. It was later revealed that the girl was not 6 or 7 years old, as initially thought, but 13. She weighed only 57 pounds, couldn't speak, had a severely curved spine, and her teeth were growing improperly. The girl couldn't take care of herself independently and had no control over urination. To protect her identity, she was given the name Jeannie. A psychologist from Southern California, David Rigler, took on her rehabilitation. Over several months, he and his colleagues examined the girl and discovered that she was born in California. On April 19, 1957, Jeannie's father, Clark, grew up in an orphanage. He experienced many rejections from foster parents due to his difficult nature, which left a deep mark on his life. The mother, Irene, had poor health. Despite this circumstance and the fact that Clark was 20 years older than her, they became a couple. After some time, the family faced severe losses. Clark, irritated by the baby's crying, once took the infant out to the cold garage. As a result, the couple's first child died of pneumonia. The second girl died during a complicated childbirth. The third son survived but became a heavy burden for the parents, as his arrival was not part of their plans. 5 years later, Ginny was born into the family, a girl who seemingly should have been the long-awaited joy, but she brought with her many problems. The couple tried to avoid contact with other people, living a secluded life. Nevertheless, they visited the doctor and took the children for medical checkups. When Ginny was 1 year and 2 months old, the pediatrician diagnosed her with possible autism. This thought greatly upset Clark. Clark decided to isolate his daughter Ginny, considering her illness a threat to his life and family well-being. This decision led to inhumane suffering for the girl, whom her father decided to keep in extreme isolation. He turned her room into a place of confinement, where she was locked in an iron cage. The windows in the room were covered with foil, and on the chair to which the girl was tied, there was a homemade device restraining her arms and legs. Ginny sat motionless all day, unable to move, and spent the nights in complete darkness in her cage, remaining in total solitude. The girl's diet consisted exclusively of baby formula, depriving her of normal nutrition and health. She didn't know what solid food was, couldn't chew, and couldn't use the toilet, even at the time of her rescue. At 13 years old, her father continued to dress her in diapers, completely ignoring the girl's physical development. The psychological abuse was no less terrifying. Clark invented his own ways of communicating with his daughter, each time forbidding her from speaking loudly. Her slightest actions that disturbed his peace were punished with brutal blows from a stick. His communication with her was limited to animal sounds, such as growling or barking, which further suppressed her personality and deprived her of a normal perception of the world around her. Her brother was not raised under such harsh conditions, but the father still sometimes hit the boy in the groin, trying to knock the nonsense out of him. After a medical examination, Irene was also found to have numerous bruises. In addition, the woman was diagnosed with advanced cataracts. She was practically blind. The woman admitted that her husband was a despot and a tyrant, but she couldn't do anything about it, as she was dependent on him. In the fall of 1970, Irene finally decided that it was time to escape from such a husband, which she did, thanks to the support of her parents. Irene took her daughter and decided to apply for disability benefits to get funds for her care. After contacting Child Protective Services, a criminal investigation was initiated against Jeannie's parents, which led to serious charges being filed for child abuse. Clark did not live to see the trial, as he committed suicide, leaving a note. "The world will never understand me." After Jeannie first met with Child Protective Services, she was immediately scheduled for a comprehensive examination at one of the state's leading clinics. The doctors working with the girl not only studied her physical and mental condition, but also focused on restoring her health, as many vital signs were disrupted due to prolonged abuse. Months of medical procedures and rehabilitation became her first step towards recovery. When the girl began receiving proper nutrition and gradually regained her physical form, she was transferred under the supervision of a group of specialists, including sociologists, linguists, and psychologists. It was determined that Jeannie's development had stopped at the level of a 1-year-old. She couldn't speak, didn't understand how to express her needs, but she showed friendliness and was eager to interact with those around her, without fearing strangers. After several months of intensive rehabilitation, the girl learned to choose solid food. She showed an interest in music, particularly in playing the piano. Although she still had difficulty constructing complex sentences, she was already able to speak simple sentences. Linguist Susan Curtis played a key role in her recovery, becoming a true mentor and support for the girl, never losing hope in her progress. Grants were allocated for Jeannie's research and rehabilitation, which eventually ran out. One day, Jeannie's nanny, Butler, who had become a close friend of the girl, suggested to the hospital management to take her home, as she was very lonely in the institution. Her request turned into an attempt to adopt the girl, which was rejected by the child welfare authorities. During this period, Jeannie often visited her mother, Irene. All charges against her were dropped. Irene had recently undergone surgery and could now see her daughter. However, after Jeannie ended up back in the hospital, her progress noticeably slowed. Therapist David Rigler, who was involved in her rehabilitation, offered to take the girl into his family, hoping to continue her treatment and help her adapt. His wife was a psychologist, and they planned for the other children in the family to help Jeannie. After some time, the Riglers gave up guardianship because the mental health university decided to stop funding the girl's rehabilitation. After the rehabilitation ended, Jeannie moved from one family to another, temporarily under the care of different people. For a while, her biological mother Irene tried to take care of and develop her daughter, but soon realized she couldn't handle such a heavy burden. In 1977, when Jeannie was already an adult, she was placed under the guardianship of a private foundation. Her brother John worked as a painter, started a family, and became the father of a girl named Pamela. It was later revealed that Pamela suffered from drug addiction. In one interview, John mentioned that his parents created conditions for him and Jeannie that resembled a concentration camp, where the children were deprived of normal development and well-being. In 2011, John passed away from complications related to diabetes. As for Jeannie herself, her further fate remains unknown. In 2016, her story caught the interest of The Guardian, but their investigation led nowhere. Nevertheless, the life story of Jeannie Wiley has inspired numerous books and films. Research conducted based on her tragic fate has led to significant discoveries in the fields of psychology and education. One of the key lessons learned from her story was the realization of the importance of early socialization, the development of communication skills, and the influence of family conditions on the formation of a child's personality. The parenting methods used by parents, or those who take on that role, significantly affect the development of personality, character, and worldview. The use of violence in the educational process inevitably leaves an indelible mark that can affect a person's entire subsequent life. The first heroine of my video will never know about this. And now, friends, I want to make you an interesting offer. You have a unique opportunity to become part of our team. If you have video editing skills, can voice over videos in Russian, English, and other languages, or write interesting scripts, we would be happy to work with you. Contact us through our Telegram bot. Link in the description. That's all for today. See you next time.